Okay, we're back with some Mistral by Red Sash Games. I'll come into turn 7 here, but I'll give a little bit of an overview of where we're up to because, just so you know where we're up to. The British fleets, the main British fleet is here in the Balearic Sea, where it's sort of forging ahead but trying to prevent the Spanish from attacking the Levant convoy, which is currently in the Barbary Coast. You can see it in the outbox heading for the Balearic Sea here. So they're just sort of shadowing their own convoy, even though they have escort orders for the victualling convoy, which is currently in Gibraltar. But they've got a auxiliary fleet auxiliary designated to do that. So they're currently fulfilling that order. But while the fleet auxiliary is doing that, they're kind of trying to prevent the Spanish from getting any frisky ideas about attacking this Levant convoy. Their other fleet, or I call it a fleet, but their other squadron of ships is in Port Mahon here and has just been given some orders to pick up the escorting of the Levant convoy. So they're going to hand over from the main fleet, which doesn't actually have the escort order, as we've said, to this squadron, which also has a fleet auxiliary that can do some escorting of the Levant convoy. So yeah, this Levant convoy is going to get escorted by that. This is going to turn around and head back towards Gibraltar and pick up the actual escorting of the victualising convoy through to Port Mahon. Great. That's the British plan, and then they are hoping that once the main fleet has escorted the victualising convoy up to Port Mahon, it can then slide over with new orders and blockade Barcelona for a bit to fulfil that order. So that's their rough plan, and they're also hoping that this squadron, as it escorts the Levant convoy out to Maltese roads, can then pick up escorting the inbound convoy from the Maltese roads over here back across the Mediterranean. So that is roughly what they're thinking they're doing. The Spanish have managed to sail their main fleet, and I call it their main fleet. It's 5 ships of the line and 2 flagships, so not particularly powerful considering that this British fleet has 3 squadrons, 12 ships of the line in it. So they probably don't want to tangle with the British at all. They're not out to battle them. But they have managed to sneak up from Cadiz to Barcelona, the British largely leaving them alone because they've got their own business to take care of. And that they now have to sail back to Cadiz to complete their cruise the Spanish coast order that they're currently under. The French are 2 impulses into blockading Bastia. I've got a blue D6 over here keeping track of that, and that needs to get up to 4 impulses, and they'll now have completed that order, and it doesn't look like anyone's around to stop them, and the British can't even attack them because they're not at war, and it would carry significant penalties to try and interfere. No point in doing that, so the French are just getting on with what they're getting on with. And then we've got some other orders on the board. I think the Spanish here in Cartagena just got given some orders, and I'm struggling to remember what they are. Oh, it's an escort order. So that's right. This Cartagenan, this group here, which is just a squadron and a couple of auxiliaries, but you know, it is what it is. The Spanish have got to try and get things done with what they've got. They've got an escort order, and they are essentially planning to come across to Palma or a port over here, Palermo, or a neutral port maybe, and try and pick up their own inbound Levant convoy, which they will want to escort up to one of the Bourbon ports on the Mediterranean coast up there. So they're planning ahead for that escort to take place. Yeah, and that is the state of play basically. So yeah, we're coming into turn 7. I've got to roll for wins, but everyone kind of knows what they're doing and they're busy going about getting it done. And I'm not totally clear yet whether there'll be much in the way of fighting, but this is I'm not too worried about that. This is an introductory scenario to get the hang of the movement, the winds, the order system, the way you interact with moving in and out of port and getting ships ready and stuff like that. So if we get some combat, great. If we don't, I'm not going to force it this time round. Although the British may get more interested in attacking the Spanish if it looks like the Spanish are succeeding in fulfilling orders. So we'll see how it goes. End of turn 7 here in Mistral by Red Sash Games. And people have started completing orders. I'm using dice to instead of the order chips themselves, because you can sometimes recycle the order chips. So I'm using dice to show orders that have been completed. We've got a blue dice showing one French order and a yellow dice showing one Spanish order. 2 orders completed there, and another order completed by the British. So the Spanish managed to sail their fleet up to Barcelona and then back to Cadiz, and they've now put all their ships into repair in the Cadiz shipyards. The British fleet managed to make it, the main British fleet made its way back to Gibraltar, but has a bit of a problem. I'd love to repair those ships, especially since I now have 4 repair points that my convoys dropped off here. I'd love to be able to spend those repairing my ships. However, it's far from clear whether I'm actually allowed to do so, because these squadrons, I'll try and zoom in, these squadrons here form part of this flotilla, and under Admiral Haddock, and it's far from clear whether I'm allowed to move squadrons in and out of that flotilla, but it looks to me like I'm not, or at least only under very specific conditions. So what the Spanish did was just unform their flotilla because it had completed its orders, but I can't unform my flotilla, because if I do, I'll fail the orders, and it's still got orders to escort the victualling convoy up to Port Mahon. So the British are a little bit stuck there. I can't really repair my ships, as far as I can tell, because that would mean taking the flotilla apart, which would fail the orders they've got, and I don't want to do that. However, I did get very lucky drawing some new orders. This guy over here, British squadron out over here, being led by Captain Bing, he was wondering what to do. He was maybe looking for some escort orders, but we just decided to go for a random draw so that we didn't end up with lots of orders. And he picked up this interdict Straits of Otranto, which actually I could have given him the moment we got him, so I'm going to do that. Interestingly, the Straits of Otranto aren't on the map anywhere. I had a bit of an email exchange with the designer about that, and he said, because the Straits of Otranto are essentially somewhere off the coast of Italy, between there and Albania, around the other side of Italy, so aren't even on the map. He said this sea zone here would do for interdicting the Straits of Otranto, and we're already there. So boom, we've got an interdict Straits of Otranto order, which we're right in the position to do. So that was very lucky for the British. So they're going to do that and then try and continue sending their repair victualling convoy up to Port Mahon and do that. The Spanish and French, well, the French are in position to do some interdiction here between Sardinia and Corsica, so they're going to do that, and I'm not sure what the Spanish are up to. I don't even know if they've got any remaining orders, but I think they have. And I think I've just knocked all the counters around down here, unfortunately. Yeah, they've got an escort order. So this guy here is waiting for the Spanish Levant convoy to come out of the out of the east. But besides that, they are going to figure out what they might like to do with the fleet in Cadiz once they can get it repaired. I'm in turn 8 here in Mistral, Red Sash Games. And just rolled the winds, and we ended up with a force 9 gale here off the coast of Cartagena, which was unfortunate for the British because the victualling convoy and fleet are here. The main fleet's here, but the victualling convoy is here in the inbox, and these are considered separate spaces, and that's actually only range 1 from there. This is space 2. And you can see that from here Barbary Coast goes to space 2, and this is range 1 and this is range 2. So the British fleet was out of the way and could have actually got a move in before the attrition effects kicked in, but with its movement allowance of 3, the convoy didn't get to move out of the way of those gales, and that's unfortunate because that knocked it down by a repair point. So it had 4 repair points headed for Port Mahon. It's now only got 3, which was a bit unfortunate. In other news, over here, right on the other side of the map, in the Maltese roads, the Spanish actually went looking for the British to see what British forces were out here. Admiral Pintado, with a understrength squadron, decided to commit some of his auxiliaries to trying to find out what the British had over here. But on both occasions you can see the used auxiliaries there. On both occasions the auxiliaries failed to find Byng, Captain Byng, who also has he's got a squadron. He's got a full strength squadron as it happens, but they didn't manage to find him. And so had Pintado wanted to get aggressive, which he might have done, he's a very capable commander, he can't because he couldn't find the British ships. So nothing else is going to happen over there because the British aren't looking for the Spanish. They're currently sitting on station, rocking up impulses in order to complete their orders to interdict this area. So they're winning here as far as they're concerned. Actually, it's that dice up there that they're using. This is the French interdicting at Sardinia. Anyway, doesn't matter. The Spanish failed to find the British there, and so all that's happening at the moment is this convoy is making its way towards Port Mahon. We'll see what happens from there. I'm in the administrative phase at the moment in turn 9, the first of the summer turns here in Mistral. But just wanted to touch on a couple of things because I've been having a lot of fun with this, but also just realised not a huge mistake, but a fairly significant mistake. So we might as well talk about that. Firstly, the British, who are lower on prestige than the French because they spent a point of prestige on a reinforcement roll. Anyway, in the summer months, these Corsairs come into play, and you roll on a table to see which ones are active. And the Barbary Corsairs were active out of Algiers. And because the British had fewer prestige than the French, they got to activate them. It's a bit of a catch-up mechanism, I think. So the Barbary Corsairs have interdicted the Tyrrhenian Sea over here, and that counts at the end of the turn as a failed order on the part of the Bourbons. So they've got 2 completed and 1 failed order there. The British up to 3 orders successfully completed, and the Bourbons essentially on a net 1 at the moment. However, I've just been having a look at the prestige chart, and this is the mistake I was talking about. You get 1 prestige for fulfilling more orders than your opponent at the end of the year, and you get -1 prestige if your opponent fulfilled more orders than you at the end of the year. So you'll move in opposite directions for fulfilling more orders. That's great. But you can also see here, you can get a point of prestige for sinking enemy flagships and a point of prestige for sinking 2 enemy ships of the line or ships of the line dual use D. These ships line D, which are sort of 50 gunners, sort of 4th, 5th rate stuff. And another prestige for 8 DPs inflicted on enemy support or troop convoys through battle or auxiliary attacks. So suddenly that makes the game, the conflict in the game rather more likely, because I was thinking you got your prestige for fulfilling the orders, and actually yes, fulfilling orders is important, but you can also go out and try and sink enemy shipping. So that's cool. that gives the game a spicier edge, because it was a bit laid back as it was. I was finding it a lot of fun and learning it very nicely, but I was finding it a little bit a bit too chilled from either side. They were generally going around sort of doing shipping tasks rather than naval combat tasks, which is great. So now that we know, or I know, that actually beating up, sinking enemy shipping is rewarded in the prestige tables, it suddenly becomes a lot more worthwhile to do. So I think I'm probably going to call this one right here and reset back at the beginning of 1740, and perhaps aim to play a longer game that runs perhaps more than 1 year. I don't think I can play a full 9 years, but I think it'll be fun to play more than one. Most of the short games last 1 year. I'm not sure how long the campaign game lasts, but I don't see why you couldn't just say, okay, I'm going to play 1740 to 1742, for example, and see what happens. So yeah, I thought I'd point that out. Current state of play, 2 orders completed for the Bourbons, 1 failed, 3 for the British. The British also managed to extend the order for this guy to carry on interdicting this area, so he can just sit there and rack up another completed order. And the British have got their victualising convoy into Port Mahon, where it can start unloading and giving them repair points there. So the British are actually in a pretty good state here. The Spanish not bad, because there hasn't been any fighting, but as it stands, I'm not learning anything new now about the system. I understand how the system's played, except that we haven't got any combat. And as I was playing it, didn't really have much reason for any combat. So I'm going to go again, knowing what I'm doing now, but also understanding that sinking Spanish or British ships is good. So let's do that. I'll wrap it up here. And I will come back with at some point in a restarted game, possibly with some combat going on.